Louisville, Kentucky, September 1988. A woman gets into her car after work. She tells her mother she's meeting her boyfriend to end things. She's tired of his temper, his control, the way his love feels more like a trap than affection. Her name is Brenda Sue Schaefer. She's 36, kind, soft-spoken, a dental assistant with a church pin still on her blouse. Her boyfriend is Melvin Henry Ignatow, real estate broker, 51, smug, older, and used to getting his way. That night, Brenda disappears. Her car is found 2 days later in a Louisville parking lot. Doors locked, keys on the seat, no sign of struggle. For 3 years, her family prays for closure. For 3 years, Ignatow walks free, giving interviews, mocking police, playing the innocent man persecuted by small-town gossip. And then one day, a construction worker pries open a vent beneath the bedroom floor of Ignatow's old house and finds 5 rolls of undeveloped film. On those negatives, the truth the law never caught. Brenda's final moments, bound, gagged, terrified, and Mel Ignatow's face staring straight into the lens. He had beaten the system, but the photographs never lied. He walked free until the evidence spoke for her. I'm Becca, and this is Deadly Truths, where history, horror, and humanity collide. Every episode, we go beyond the headlines and into the hidden corners of American violence. The soldiers, the murderers, the martyrs, and the ghosts that history tried to forget. Some of these stories are old, some are still unfolding, but they all ask the same question. What drives ordinary people to cross the line between duty and destruction? Louisville in the late 1980s was clean, conservative, and quietly segregated. The kind of place where reputations mattered, where a woman's smile could be currency and a man's handshake could buy silence. Brenda Sue Schaefer fit the mold of that world perfectly. 36 years old, dental assistant, devout Catholic, she sang in the church choir, sent birthday cards on time, and doted on her nieces and nephews. She wasn't glamorous, she was good, and that was enough, until she met Mel Ignatow. Mel was 20 years older, smooth-talking, the kind of man who knew how to make people feel seen. He'd been divorced, rumored to be controlling, but he had money, charm, and a house in a good neighborhood. To Brenda, that looked like stability. To him, she looked like possession. At first, the relationship seemed typical. Dinners, gifts, long drives through the city. Then came the tests. Don't wear that dress again. Why were you talking to him? You don't need to see your friends so much. Friends began noticing changes. The weight loss, the nervous laugh, the constant checking of her watch. She once told her coworker, Mel gets angry if I'm late. He says I make him feel invisible. By summer, she was planning her exit. On September 23, 1988, she told her mother, I'm going to return his things and end it once and for all. Her mother said, Do you want me to come with you? Brenda smiled. No, I'll be fine. She never came home. The next morning, her coworkers called the police when she didn't show up for work. Her car was found 2 days later in the back of a car lot on Bardstown Road. Keys on the seat, purse missing, no blood, no broken glass, nothing to tell the story. The detective started with Mel. He was polite, helpful, and rehearsed. He said Brenda had left his house alive. He even offered to help with flyers and TV interviews. On camera, he said, I loved Brenda. I hope whoever did this is caught. Behind closed doors, detectives described him as arrogant, smirking through questioning, correcting their grammar, and referring to Brenda as that woman. He passed a polygraph. He even joked that police were chasing ghosts. But ghosts have a way of coming back. The months dragged on, no body, no blood, no weapon. Then came a tip, not from a stranger, but from a woman who knew Mel better than anyone else. Marianne Shore, a former girlfriend, hairdresser, and willing accomplice. She told police a story that sounded like fiction, a soundproof room, a hidden camera, and a night of violence that even she couldn't forget. Detectives didn't believe her, not at first, but she offered proof, a buried body On January 9th, 1990, they dug into the woods of Jefferson County and found what was left of Brenda Sue Schaefer. Bones wrapped in plastic, a ring still on her finger. The missing pieces of the story were finally in the ground. But Mel Ignatow was still free. The trial of Mel Ignatow opened in 1991 in Jefferson County. Louisville had been waiting 3 years for justice, and by the time jurors took their seats, the city was already divided. On one side, Brenda Schaefer's family and friends holding framed photographs and rosaries. On the other, Ignatow's supporters, mostly real estate colleagues and country club acquaintances, convinced he'd been smeared by jealous ex-lovers and overeager cops. The courtroom smelled like coffee and fear. Cameras flashed. Reporters jostled for a clear view of the defendant. Neat gray suit, gold watch, calm as a surgeon. Prosecutors opened with the one thing they had, Mary Ann Shore. She testified for hours, describing how she and Mel built a soundproof room, bought bondage gear, and turned Brenda's final night into a ritual of control. She showed police where they buried the body. On paper, it sounded airtight. In person, it sounded unbelievable. The defense went to work. They painted Shore as a liar, an unstable woman obsessed with Ignatow. They told jurors her story was a fantasy built on guilt and jealousy. When she broke down on the stand, the defense smiled. There were no photographs, no fingerprints, no fibers tying Ignatow to the burial site. The body had been in the ground too long. And so the jury saw two things, a woman unraveling and a man who never raised his voice. Calm wins cases. Rage loses them. After 2 weeks, the jurors deliberated less than 5 hours. When they returned, the foreman couldn't look at the victim's family. Not guilty. Gasps. A scream from Brenda's sister. Someone fainted in the second row. Mel Ignatow turned to his lawyer and smirked. Outside, television crews caught him telling a reporter, "The truth always comes out." Louisville erupted. The Courier-Journal called it the verdict that shamed Kentucky. Protesters gathered on the courthouse steps holding signs that read, "Double justice for double murder." Inside the DA's office, detectives pounded desks and swore. They knew he did it, everyone knew. But the law had spoken, and the law, once spoken, doesn't listen again. Weeks turned into months. Ignatow sold interviews, posed for photos, and bragged that he'd beaten the system. Brenda Schaefer's parents stopped opening the blinds. They couldn't bear to see daylight on a world that had called their daughter's killer innocent. Then, in 1992, fate stepped in, quietly, by accident. A construction worker renovating Ignatow's old house pulled up a bedroom vent. Inside the dark cavity, 5 undeveloped rolls of film, a velvet jewelry pouch, and dust thick enough to hide the smell of truth. When the film was developed, even hardened agents went silent. Frame after frame showed Brenda, alive, bound, terrified, and Mel Ignatow's face beside her smiling at the camera. It was the kind of proof prosecutors dream of, delivered a year too late. The photographs changed everything. There's discovery, and then there's revelation. The man remodeling Ignatow's house didn't know what he'd found. He thought it was an air vent, just a loose grate stuffed with junk. He pulled it open and dumped the contents into a cardboard box. What tumbled out looked ordinary. A jewelry pouch, a few film canisters, and a faint metallic smell. He didn't call police until his wife noticed the initials scratched on the jewelry. BSS, Brenda Sue Schaefer. Within hours, the FBI was at the scene. They processed the canisters like holy relics. When the photos developed, they told the story no courtroom had been willing to see. Brenda bound to a chair, Brenda gagged, Brenda crying, and Mel Ignatow, standing over her, looking straight into the lens. He had posed for the evidence. Investigators called it one of the most horrifying pieces of proof ever recovered in Kentucky law enforcement. The images weren't quick or accidental. They were deliberate, staged. Every frame was a record of control. Ignatow didn't just kill Brenda. He photographed his dominance, cataloged it, hid it, and walked away smugly knowing the truth was buried with the body. And now, years later, that truth surfaced from under his floorboards like a ghost. But the law didn't care. He had been tried. He had been acquitted. The Constitution protected him. Double jeopardy. The shield built to protect the innocent now protected the guilty. Detectives met in private, furious. They said, "He admitted it on film. There has to be something we can do." The district attorney's office knew the answer. Nothing. They couldn't charge him for murder again, but they could charge him for lying about it. The perjury charge was a loophole, a small, bitter taste of justice. Ignatow had testified under oath that he didn't kill Brenda. Those photos made that statement a crime. When he walked into federal court in 1992, he was still arrogant. He told reporters, "I'm here because they can't stand losing." But this time his words cost him. Under oath, he said, "I killed her. I killed Brenda Schaefer, and I am sorry." But even in that moment, observers said he didn't sound remorseful, just annoyed that the game was over. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for perjury and currency violations. 8 years for the documented torture and murder of a woman whose face haunted an entire city. He served 5. When Ignatow was released, he returned to Louisville, bought groceries, paid bills, lived quietly. People crossed the street when they saw him. Reporters described him as gray, expressionless, hollowed out, but unrepentant. One neighbor said he looked like he was still winning. In September 2008, Ignatow slipped and fell in his apartment. The glass coffee table shattered. He bled to death on the floor, alone. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A man who lived above the law finally undone by something as ordinary as gravity and broken glass. Justice didn't come from a gavel. It came from time, decay, and the small cruelties of living long enough to die unloved. After the confession, Louisville had to face itself. The problem wasn't only Mel Ignatow. It was what he'd exposed, how charm, class, and confidence could still outweigh a woman's truth. In the years that followed, Kentucky lawmakers overhauled evidence preservation laws. Every piece of potential proof, photos, fibers, testimony, had to be documented and stored indefinitely, no matter how weak the case looked. It was a bureaucratic fix to a moral failure, but it mattered. The Ignatow case became a cautionary tale in legal seminars, taught under the title Justice Too Late. Students studied it not for what it proved, but for what it destroyed. Public trust in the idea that truth always wins. Double jeopardy existed for a reason, to protect citizens from government abuse. But here, it protected a killer. Even seasoned attorneys admitted it felt like a glitch in morality. And yet the photographs remained. They were sealed in FBI archives, filed under Schaefer, Brenda Sue. Agents who'd seen them said they never forgot the look in her eyes, that frozen moment where terror met betrayal. They were never released to the public. They didn't need to be. Everyone knew what they showed. For Brenda's family, there was no closure, only endurance. They forgave what they could and outlived the rest. Her mother once said, "I still pray for Mel, not for mercy, for judgment." When Ignatow died in 2008, there was no headline big enough to hold the irony. The same newspapers that once printed his courtroom smiles now printed his obituary. Found dead after accidental fall. No trial, no jury, no tears, just a quiet note that the universe had finally evened the score. The case became a mirror for something larger, how we still measure justice by outcome instead of effort. The prosecutors did their jobs, the jury did theirs, the system worked, technically. But in doing so, it reminded us that legality and morality aren't twins. They only shake hands when it's convenient. Ignatow understood that better than anyone. He believed the world rewarded control, and for a time, it did. Yet in the end, control was all he had left, a life built on dominance ending in a pool of blood and silence. Today, Louisville still remembers Brenda Sue Schaefer. Her name appears in textbooks, advocacy conferences, and memorials for victims of intimate partner violence. She was more than a victim of double jeopardy. She was proof that sometimes the law can be blind and deaf, but the truth still finds a way to speak, and sometimes it speaks from beneath the floor. You've been listening to Deadly Truths with Becca. If you found this story compelling, follow, rate, and share on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. It helps keep these forgotten histories alive. Research and narration is done by me, can't you tell? And remember, the past isn't dead. It's just doing time in the bluegrass.